You're on the train on your way home, and the situation feels oddly charged. There's a tension in the air that's not exactly humorous. It's not about sex, though, even if there's a quiet electricity pulsing through the scene. No, there's no actual sex on this train. But then, out of nowhere, Diane Lane appears in your mind. Maybe because someone across the aisle resembles her at 14. That iconic face. At 18, she was on the cover of Time magazine. Not just a beautiful girl, but a symbol, a presence. Angelic and intelligent. Young, but already a millionaire. Already carrying the weight of being a teen idol. Hollywood courted her relentlessly, and yet, as she grew older and moved through the industry, she became quieter, more mysterious. She stopped speaking about certain things. It wasn't until she was 59 that Diane confirmed long-suspected relationships with co-stars Christopher Atkins and Timothy Hutton, flings that had never been addressed before, merely whispered about in backlot corners and fan magazines. These revelations added a deeper hue to her role in Unfaithful, a performance so raw, so uncomfortably intimate that audiences were convinced it had to be rooted in truth. Diane Lane has played dozens of emotionally complex, sensual characters, but she's also lived through personal trials, a couple of messy marriages, a high-profile arrest that was later dropped, and a long string of rumors she never validated. Always behind those soulful, grieving eyes, there was a woman who stayed half-hidden. Who is Diane Lane, really? That story's rarely told in full. Born January 22nd, 1965 in New York City, she entered a world already spinning with theatrical energy. Her mother, Colleen Farrington, also known as Lee Farrington, had once been a Playboy centerfold and nightclub singer. Her father, Burton, Eugene Lane, was a Manhattan drama coach, a former cab driver who taught humanities at City College and had worked under John Cassavetes. Diane's early years were turbulent. At just 13 days old, her parents split. Her mother took her to Mexico, then handed her over to her father at age 6. What followed were years of bouncing between hotels and apartments, traveling Manhattan, in his cab. Education came irregularly. Diane's upbringing was anything but traditional, filled with bohemian artists, offbeat routines, and the sort of freedom that comes with no structure. She matured fast. By age 15, she was living on her own, paying rent, and finishing school through correspondence. She'd briefly run off to Los Angeles with Christopher Atkins and a friend from Child Bride of Short Creek, a decision she later described as a young girl craving too much freedom too soon. After returning to New York, she stayed with a friend's family. Then, abruptly, her mother resurfaced, abducted her, and brought her back to Georgia. Her father fought in court and won Diane's return 6 weeks later. She didn't speak to her mother for 3 years. Yet in Georgia, Diane occasionally visited her grandmother, a Pentecostal woman in a small town. There, Diane learned simplicity, fixing lawnmowers, eating salted pork butter, embracing peace. That contrast, the chaos of Manhattan and the quiet of Georgia, helped root her as she navigated Hollywood. At 13, Diane starred in A Little Romance, opposite Laurence Olivier. It wasn't just a debut, it was an explosion. Suddenly, the world took notice. She wasn't just cute, she was magnetic. Her performances carried a surprising depth. A year later, she graced the cover of Time magazine under the headline, Hollywood's Whiz Kids. They called her a fresh breeze, someone whose acting wasn't rehearsed, but lived. Diane Lane didn't seem like she was reciting lines. She embodied them. By age 14, she had already mastered the art of presence, making viewers believe her feelings were real, because many of them were. Diane Lane achieved something that many actors chase for a lifetime, the trust of the audience. It's that rarest currency in Hollywood, faith. From the outset, she didn't just play roles, she embodied them with such sincerity that viewers believed her even when she said nothing. Her early performances in films like Six Pack, Touched, By Love, Rumblefish, The Outsiders, Streets of Fire, and The Cotton Club helped solidify her as more than a child prodigy. Directors like Francis Ford Coppola cast her multiple times, recognizing her emotional intelligence and natural screen presence. At just 18, Lane was already a millionaire with a packed shooting schedule, commanding the screen with a maturity far beyond her years. Yet the intensity of fame came with its costs. She was often linked romantically with co-stars like Matt Dillon, Michael Pare, and Richard Gere, more because of on-screen chemistry than real-life connections. The media, always hungry, blurred the line between Diane and her characters. She became the ideal girlfriend archetype, over and over again, which robbed her of opportunities to showcase the complexity she was capable of. Diane Lane was expected to be beautiful, desirable, but not necessarily profound. Over time, this forced her to draw back from the spotlight and become more selective in her work. She realized early that fame didn't equate to being understood and that talent wasn't enough unless you also protected your story from being written by others. It wasn't until Unfaithful in 2002 that Diane got the role that would break the mold. Directed by Diane Lane, she played Connie, a suburban wife who begins an affair, not out of lust, but from loneliness and detachment. The infamous train station scene where Connie sits alone, shaking, overwhelmed by emotion, was never in the original script. It was a spontaneous moment, filmed in one take, and has since been cited as a masterclass in silent acting. She didn't need lines, her body said everything. The role earned her an Academy Award nomination and made it clear Diane Lane was not a supporting player to any leading man. She was the movie. Just a year later, in Under the Tuscan Sun, she gave a completely different but equally powerful performance. As Frances, a middle-aged writer recovering from a painful divorce, she buys a villa in Italy and begins to rebuild her life. The film wasn't about a woman being strong from the beginning. It was about falling apart and learning to live again. Diane brought an authentic vulnerability to the character, real, messy, and relatable. During press for the film, she joked on Conan O'Brien about drinking all the wine and missing her spaghetti, revealing how emotionally draining the experience had been. Tuscany may have looked like paradise, but for Diane, it mirrored the emotional weight Frances was carrying. The performance earned her a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actress in a Comedy or Musical and connected with countless women who saw themselves in Frances, not broken, but reawakening. Diane Lane had evolved. She was no longer the teenage dream or the Hollywood girlfriend. She was a fully realized woman on screen, carrying complex narratives with depth and grace. She embodied characters that lived in the quiet spaces of grief and strength, carving out a place for women whose stories are too often overlooked. The betrayal portrayed in Diane Lane's roles never leaned into melodrama or theatrics. Instead, her characters carried guilt and emotional turmoil with subtlety, revealing inner fractures through glances, hesitation, and the weight of silence. In Unfaithful, it wasn't the allure of the lover that drove her character, but rather a slow disconnection from the life she once understood. A devoted wife lost in the quiet rhythm of domesticity, unable to reconcile her identity with the woman she was expected to be. Diane's performance didn't rely on explosive monologues or overt emotional breakdowns. It thrived in the quiet moments where guilt flickered in her eyes. Her nomination at the Spirit Awards wasn't just for a single performance, but a recognition of how deeply she had learned to express conflict through restraint. That mastery carried into her role in Secretariat or 2010, where she played Penny Chenery, a housewife who, amid personal upheaval, steps into the male-dominated world of horse racing and transforms a struggling farm into the birthplace of a legend. It wasn't just a feel-good sports story. It was a story about a woman reclaiming purpose, dismantling age and gender stereotypes, and doing it all with integrity. Diane brought a quiet force to Penny, never overplaying the empowerment instead, allowing the character's calm persistence to speak for itself. Her portrayal was a statement. She had moved beyond being cast as the romantic interest. She was a centerpiece, a leader, a storyteller in her own right. In Trumbo, 2015, she stepped back again into the background, but deliberately so, portraying Cleo Trumbo, a woman supporting her blacklisted husband during a fraught political era. The character didn't ask for attention, didn't command scenes, but Diane imbued Cleo with weight. The stillness, the unspoken loyalty, the emotional gravity of standing by someone whose actions defined their family's survival. She made that visible without needing a single dramatic scene. It was a continuation of her signature style, deep human roles grounded in realism. Even her reunion with Richard Gere in Nights in Rodantha, 2008, offered a different kind of romantic story. Not one of youthful infatuation, but of two wounded souls reconnecting in middle age, seeking healing rather than fireworks. Their chemistry wasn't about heat, but history. A shared sorrow, an aching attempt at redemption. Lane and Gere played not just lovers, but survivors, people trying to believe in love again after betrayal. The pauses between them said more than any dialogue could. Diane's gift was in that restraint, in making silence speak volumes. Throughout it all, she remained a grounded presence in the public eye, graceful, private, uninterested in celebrity spectacle. But in 2005, during a candid interview with Esquire, she broke her silence with a personal revelation. She had, in fact, been romantically involved with both Timothy Hutton and Christopher Atkins. For decades, she'd sidestepped those rumors, maintaining her privacy. When she finally admitted the truth, she did it without shame or dramatics. No evasion, no blame, she said. It wasn't the confession that stunned people. It was how she owned it, not as scandal, but as history, as truth. It reframed her image not as someone wronged, but someone who had also made choices, experienced heartbreak, and stepped across the line. It was a moment that showed not just the actress, but the woman behind her roles, complex, imperfect, and unafraid to claim her story. Diane Lane's story is one of complexity wrapped in quiet courage. She never chased the spotlight, yet it always found her, drawn to the contradictions she wore with grace. Her career was built on roles that showcased the tangled human experience, characters teetering between strength and vulnerability, victims and heroes at once. Off-screen, she mirrored that same multifaceted energy. There was something magnetic about her authenticity, even when it didn't fit neatly into the public's expectations. Her willingness to let life mark her, without over-explaining or defending, made her seem not like an actress portraying life, but a woman actually living it. The calm she maintained wasn't passive. It was powerful, a choice rooted in maturity and resilience. Her relationship with Christopher Lambert was a chapter marked by deep connection and mutual understanding. They loved, learned, and parted without drama, preserving a lasting friendship and raising their daughter as true partners. With Josh Brolin, the love was more turbulent, marked by headlines and private struggles. Still, Diane responded with the same quiet strength. She chose not to become a media spectacle, even in moments where many would have. She never lashed out, never played victim. Instead, she walked away when it became clear that love alone wasn't enough. Diane Lane's silence has never been empty. It's a statement, a refusal to perform her pain, a quiet assertion that some truths belong only to her. Diane Lane's story is one that flows quietly beneath the surface of Hollywood's loud, ever-churning current. She never played by the rules of fame. She didn't leverage scandals, flaunt relationships, or chase attention through public meltdowns or reinventions. Instead, she walked her path deliberately, almost defiantly silent, letting her performances speak in places where others would speak for themselves. Her refusal to let romantic setbacks define her, including a contentious arrest and failed marriages, became emblematic of her strength. She created a sanctuary around her private life, one the press could never truly penetrate, and within it, she flourished as a woman unaffected by the hunger for celebrity. Rather than rebranding herself post-40, Diane deepened into her identity. She took on roles with complexity, women etched by experience rather than molded to please. Whether as Martha Kent, Slim Keith, or her Emmy-nominated turn in Feud, she proved again and again that she wasn't just surviving in Hollywood. She was elevating the narrative of what it means to grow older in it. Her work outside the screen, quiet, humanitarian efforts with Higher International, her devotion to a grounded, mindful life, revealed a woman who was never detached from the world, but simply chose not to broadcast her goodness. Diane Lane's beauty is not in defying age, but embracing it. Every laugh line a trace of a life fully lived, not corrected by surgery, but honored like a passage. She is not just a former teen star, nor a faded name with nostalgic weight. She's a living testament to what longevity, grace, and unshakable integrity look like in an industry obsessed with reinvention.